Hello, Bill.
Good morning, Matt.
Welcome to the DMZ, everybody. I'm back in our nation's capital. And
in the swamp.
In the southern DMZ and the cesspool, the sewer, as Donald Trump calls it. The city named after George Washington. He calls the sewer. I don't like that.
Before we talk politics, we haven't talked about music in a long time.
I was thinking about music because Hillary Clinton's book shares a name with a Sublime song.
Oh, really?
What happened?
Right. The title and the cover just was released today. I guess it's going to be, the book's going to come out in September, so we'll plenty to talk about there. You know, I actually haven't listened to much music, I think, in a year. All I listen to are the Taylor Swift CDs that my kids are obsessed with in the car, which have been driving me insane.
What do we call that? Is that called pop? Like that? The Katy Perry, Taylor Swift. Is there a name for Justin Bieber? Like what? Because that's what my kids love too. That's
I mean, you know, Swift moved from country to pop, but I would
right. But I mean now, like it's not hip hop. It's not.
No,
it's not rock. I mean, rock is like Led Zeppelin, I think, right? Like
I mean, there are certain songs you would say have rock elements to it. I mean, I think I would just say pop in general tends to pull traces of a lot of other genres and make it as...
I just feel like saying pop sounds outdated. Like I'm talking about skiffle or the Beatles or something. I don't know. Like it feels like there's a... Is it top 40? I don't know.
I mean, these are all terms that only old people like you and I use.
Like, what does it mean?
But
I think for them it's just music.
Yeah. I mean, they probably aren't really categorizing it very much.
But my kids are like, I want to hear rock, and I'll put on like AC/DC, and they're like, no. I want to hear rock, and then I'll put on some Creedence, or and then what it is it's the pop. Right. I got no other word.
Anyway, so I'm at a point where I'm really picky. Like I'll be in a moment where I want to listen to something. I'm washing dishes, or I'm in the car, and I want it to be the right thing. I don't want to just turn on the radio and hear random stuff. I don't want to hear. Sometimes I want to hear something that's familiar, but sometimes I don't. But if I want to hear something unfamiliar, I want to be good. Because I get so little time that I can dedicate to it. I don't want to waste it. And I stumbled across Miranda Lambert's new CD. Well, it's not that new. It came out, I think, in November.
This is a country.
Is this country? Right? Although I would say elements of rock and elements of pop in there, but still true blue country. It's a double album, The Weight of My Wings, and it's just excellent. It's just a superb collection.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean,
I'll have to check it out.
I think you'd love it. And people who like country but don't like it too saccharine, don't like,
So is it like Lucinda Williams? Like what's it?
There are traces. I mean, Miranda Lambert, I think, is generally sort of more poppy than Lucinda Williams, but there are definitely Lucinda elements in there. It is a post-breakup. She broke up with Blake Shelton, who's now with Gwen Stefani. And many of reviewers said this is a much more sophisticated breakup project than your average breakup project. There's not a "F you Blake Shelton" track on it.
Yeah.
But there's lots of stuff that's just exploring the kind of feelings when you're kind of starting life anew in there, and the ranges of emotions that are involved, and it's just very well crafted.
I'm certainly gonna check that out.
And because the double, you got an hour and a half of music on there, so you can listen to it a lot and not get bored with it because there's just a lot of good stuff on it.
That's really good. I don't have the Echo like you do, but I have this Amazon Music. That's amazing. Oh, you could just look, once you have it, you can pretty much listen to any song out there for free and just stream it. I don't know how they make money.
Well, that you can link that to your Echo if you have the Echo. Once you
is
pay
it
for
Prime?
The
you get it through.
Well, I have Prime, and so with Prime, I get some music. But if I paid a little extra, I would get Amazon Music Unlimited, and that's more like a Spotify or a Pandora, and I would get the whole database. And so there are a number of things where I ask
I'm
for
just a free rider on my wife's accounts. She I don't know anything, but somehow she is ahead of the curve on all this, and then I just get to use it later. So
actually, I'm listening to the Miranda Lambert CD through Spotify, Because with Spotify for free, through the laptop, I can listen to full albums in proper chronological order. If I was
you people don't know this about you like I do, that you have basically gamed the system.
I'm trying. But
you watch and listen to everything pretty much for free.
But you say listening to your laptop, it's not mobile. You can't listen to it in the car. That's a bit of a downer. But I can, through Bluetooth, link the laptop to the Echo, which has a better speaker, and that's how I'm listening to Miranda Lambert right now.
Wow, we should do a podcast on how you do all this. Speaking of which, my wife is. Did you see the Minimalist Netflix documentary?
No, I've not.
On the Minimalist, and there's a podcast. My wife's really into this minimalism thing now. These are people who like, it's getting rid of like commercialism and having. And some of them only own like 30 items in the world, or 30 pieces of clothing. It's really scaling down.
Yeah, this does not portend well for you.
Well, luckily as long as it doesn't touch books, and it does, by the way. But I'm like 90% bought in on the minimalist theory. But I think that number one, very few of them have children,
Right.
And number two, because they're also down on square footage, and I actually am a huge.
You should go tiny house.
No, see, that's where they're wrong. They square footage, even though I do think most people have way too much stuff in their house.
That's what a big house does. You get a big house, you fill the borders of your house.
That's the mistake.
A tiny house, you have to get the stuff out.
You have to. Well, see, yeah, but the reverse engine. That's to me, that's like the cheap way of forcing yourself to do what you should do.
It's not very libertarian.
No, but but I'm also against getting rid of books, and they think that you should do that. But there is something to be said. I will say this: for most items, not books, but for most items, it's like if you haven't used something in the past year and you're not going to use it in the next 3 months, you should probably get rid of it. And there's hoarding, and there's like the emotional connection to items and all this stuff. But anyway, check out that podcast, check out that documentary on Netflix. And I have no idea. I guess we're just sharing cool stuff.
We're delaying the inevitable, much like Republicans in healthcare.
Well, Miranda Lambert and minimalism.
So let's cut to the chase here. We all know that you can't repeal Obamacare. It's baked in the cake. Anytime you pull the Jenga piece out, things go haywire. And if Republicans could just accept that and pull the plug, they could move on to tax reform or infrastructure, whatever it is they want to do. But it seems like in the Senate, it's like a hot potato. Nobody wants to own being that vote for the person who prevented Republicans from repealing health care. So you do a repeal and replace bill, and 9 Republicans break off. So you can't blame it on one person. You do a repeal only, and then another. I think was it 11 that didn't do that one. And it's a different cast of characters to some extent for these. And now this talk is about having a skinny repeal that only gets rid of the individual mandate and the medical device tax and the employer mandate, which would be like literally the worst possible thing you could do. It is like pulling out like the Jenga piece that would make all the premiums go through the roof. But it's being sold as not being the final bill. This is just getting to conference. Right. We're just getting to conference. We're going to go down the street and go another 10 rounds trying to figure out what the bill is, which we can't figure out ourselves.
No, but this has been the compelling way that they've gotten things done the whole time. They got a House bill by saying, hey, we got to start the process. Let's get it to the Senate. They'll fix it. Now the Senate's going to say, let's just pass it to keep the process. First it was the motion to proceed. You got to pass the motion to proceed, then just so that we can even debate it. And then it was, well, you just pass the skinny repeal so we can get it to committee. And so far, it has actually worked. I mean, argument.
It's worked in like keeping the game of hot potato going. It hasn't worked in developing a policy that's going to become law, and it's not working in getting Republicans to do anything else that's important on their agenda. It's literally spinning wheels.
I think there's a chance, maybe it's 25%, that by the end of the year, Republicans have repealed and replaced Obamacare, and pass tax reform.
That's insane.
I think there's a chance. Like I said, I think it's 20 to 25%. I'm not betting. It's not a good chance. But no, look, I think it's possible that they do the skinny repeal, that passes the Senate, that goes into committee, and they basically put together some sort of thing they call repeal and replace that can pass the House and the Senate, and that they do it.
Everything that has been proposed gets an awful CBO score. And I have a friend of mine who's an AP reporter, and I mentioned this, he's proud of me. He goes, how quaint that you care about the CBO score. But the fact of the matter is, every time there's been a CBO score, I mean, sometimes they've had the vote before the score, when the score comes out, and when the score comes out, some Republicans, enough, at least 3 in the Senate,
every time they've had to do it, they've somehow pulled it off.
Well, they pulled off an extension of the process,
right?
But they've never been able to lock down 50 Senate votes around an actual bill. And every time there is an actual bill and there is a CBO score, at least the Republicans say, this is a bad bill and I'm not going to support it as it is. And there's nothing swirling out there. There's no idea Republicans have that doesn't increase the number of uninsured and shift some cost of premiums onto older people, because that is the point of all the proposals.
I'm not going to argue with you about the policy part of it, whether or not it's actually going to end up being a good policy. But in terms of actually passing something, we saw Trump go to West Virginia, and then Shelley Moore Capito completely folded on what she had said a week earlier about the motion to proceed. We saw Dean Heller, who has sort of come around. We've seen he went to Alaska. He didn't go to Alaska. He is reportedly threatening Alaska. Now, I don't think that's to get Murkowski's vote, but I think that's to send a message to other people. I'm just saying, these people might fold. I think that Murkowski and Collins are solid no votes. But the rest of them, I would not be surprised if they find a way. And again, I'm saying,
to fold. I mean, if they were going to fold, I mean, there's no way to pass a final bill without that CBO score. And that CBO score is going to say some number of people will be uninsured because of this, and some older people are going to pay more.
Okay.
There's no way to avoid that. So you have to have. You accept that premise?
Yes.
Okay. So you have to have Trump and McConnell lean on you and say, don't care about that. This is for the party. This is for your president. You promised to do repeal. It doesn't matter what's going to be in the Democratic attack ads. It doesn't matter what the actual impact of the policy is going to be in your state and the people you have to answer to come your next election. You should push that aside and do it for the president who is below 40% in the polls and is already shown complete inability to remain loyal to the closest people on his own team.
Right.
Why would you take that chance? This is a guy who dumped on the House bill after
They took the chance when they voted for the House bill. The House members took that chance already. The senators took that chance, sort of, when they voted to proceed. So I'm saying I think that I agree with your premise. But I'm saying yes, there's a chance that they will do that. I'm not saying they will, but I think there's a reasonable chance they do it.
I sometimes, my analysis sometimes is cramped by rationality. I will grant that, but I'm doing my best to I'm not trying to put my biases on these other people.
Why did Shelley Moore Capito completely flip and do the exact opposite of what she said a week earlier? What about Ron Johnson? Ron Johnson, he didn't completely flip, but that's another example of someone who was like, I have no idea what this bill is. How can I vote to proceed on something we don't even know what it is? Mitch McConnell's lying to me. And of course he comes around.
Well,
They come around.
They came around on a procedural vote, and I agree it's a flip. I agree with that completely. But clearly, no one wants to take the individual blame for killing the whole thing. But they also don't want to take the blame for screwing the people in their own states.
John McCain got up, and I love John McCain. Prayers for John McCain, war hero, great American. Very good for my career as well, by the way. Let me just say, believe me, very good for my career. No, because I started off, one of the value added that I had was I worked at townhall.com. And everybody else there hated John McCain and loved Mitt Romney. And I was the only one who was writing, like, maybe John McCain actually might be more conservative than Mitt Romney. And so it was great because then I, ended up having this sort of open door with the McCain people, and they ended up winning the nomination, so it worked out. So I love John McCain, but this is a guy who got up and gave a compelling speech about how we should return to a bipartisan, regular order type situation, and then votes for the motion to he alone could have voted against it, and then they would have had Republicans would have no choice but to work with Democrats if they wanted to do this.
McCain has always been an incredibly maddening figure, as we talked about on your podcast, the Matt Lewis, the news podcast, the other day.
Oh yeah, people should go listen to that. We did a McCain's legacy episode on Matt Lewis in the news last week.
But I think McConnell came to these people and said, don't kill us in the crib. Let it live for another day. Give us a chance to work out these problems. Just don't slam the door shut. And they gave him that. And so maybe it is that the people that said, I'm worried about the cost of premiums in my state, I'm worried about people not getting insurance, I'm worried about the markets not being stabilized, without not having a proper replacement plan. Maybe those people go back on everything that they said out of party loyalty at the end of the day. They would have to be doing as much. I mean, going back on the motion to proceed vote is not the kind of thing that's going to bite you in a TV ad 2 years from now, so long as the final product of the bill is not terrible in the eyes of voters. I mean, if Dean Heller voted yes on motion to proceed, voted no on a final bill, but the bill became law and everybody hated it, he would be held accountable for that motion to proceed vote. But if he votes for motion to proceed, he votes no on the final bill, and he kills the final bill, and people say, good, I hated that bill, you're not going to run a motion to proceed ad against him, because that's not what the final outcome was. So I think all these guys are biding for time and not wanting to take the heat for here's the cabal, here are the awful traitors that killed repeal. They'd rather see this, merry-go-round of bills that are proven terrible over time, and different people vote no on different ones, and so you can't quite single out an individual for killing it.
Right. Now, obviously, I mean, sort of the obvious point here is that we have competing interests, and one of the interests would be to keep your campaign promise and to put points on the board. I mean, if Republicans can go into midterms saying, we got a Supreme Court justice, we kept our promise to repeal and replace Obamacare, and we cut taxes, they've got an argument for, they have an argument for re-election in the midterms.
Well, I mean, the current repeal and replace bill polls about 20%. So I kept my promise, and passing that you all hate is not, it's not a great. Sometimes you pass something that's not immediately popular because you have the confidence that once it's implemented, it will become popular. And Obamacare is, at least their thinking at the time was, once we do this, people will like it. Now, it took 8 years to get to that point, but that was the logic. I don't think any Republicans say to themselves, I know this is a tough vote now, but it's sure going to look good 2 years from now. I don't think they believe that. Like, they're very worried what this actually will do on the ground. And so in that case, I would think the rational argument would be pull the plug, get to tax reform. We've promised people tax cuts. And if we don't get that done, then we're in real trouble. Nobody likes this healthcare thing. People might like tax cuts.
They just can't pull the plug because of the sunk costs. I mean, they won't. Like, obviously, they've had so many chances where they could have walked away and moved on to something else, and they could have done it in the spring. They could have done it this summer. I mean, they just, even if the bill goes down, they just keep coming back. They won't give it up. So it seems to me that they have decided that they will pass this, no matter what they have to do. This will happen.
And that would mean that if they don't have the votes, they won't quit. They won't move to tax reform. I mean, because they have to pass a 2018 budget resolution to move to tax reform. And once they pass that, if healthcare is not done, healthcare is dead. It wipes away the 2017 budget reconciliation. So you think they just won't even get to? I mean, I know you think they might do the whole thing. They might get this done in the next.
Well, I think there's a chance they could, like a 20 to 25% chance, but I think it's more likely that this thing lingers and drags on. But they don't seem to have the ability to walk away from healthcare. It's as if they've decided this is going to happen. The failure is not an option. And it will happen no matter how long it takes. We're going to do this. We're going to get this done. Like, at what point do they say, okay, let's quit throwing good money after bad and pull the plug? Like, there's been many chances to do that, and they just never do it.
Now, while Republicans have been dealing with their internal divisions on health care, Democrats, led by Senator Chuck Schumer, Senate Minority Leader, rolled out a set of Democratic policies under the slogan "A Better Deal," which is designed to say that Democrats are not just against Trump, we are for something. And what we are for are a suite of economic proposals with a strong populist bent, very critical about corporate power and monopoly power, hoping to win back those white working class voters that abandoned Democrats for Trump. This happened on a Monday, and we were talking a little bit offline before, and your perception was this was a bad rollout.
Well, so, I mean, part of it is the name sounds fine to me. I mean, it's not great, but it sounds fine. But, like, there was so much mockery on Twitter from all over. I mean, from all quarters, it seemed like, of Twitter, people mocking the rollout and mocking. Now, personally, I just felt like it was buried, like it just didn't get much attention. Not that it was bad, but there were a lot of people who were sort of dissing this, the slogan and the rollout. I don't really understand why, what's so specifically bad about it, but maybe you can tell me.
Well, so there's a couple phases of this process which are interesting. But so before Monday, before the actual proposals came out and the slogan and the tagline were leaked, which is better deal, I think it was better jobs, better wages, better skills, and then better skills got dropped, and now it's better future. Immediately, a lot of...
I'm only for better skills if they spell it with a Z.
A lot of left Twitter, and I'd say some media Twitter, maybe some conservative Twitter, were like, oh, Democrats are the worst. Months of focus groups to have this pablum milquetoast slogan. How they always, every time they just don't know how to campaign. They don't know how to do a slogan. They don't know anything that has an edge or energy. It just seemed kind of it seemed like a committee product. Now, I mentioned in a little tweet storm last week, early 2006. The Democratic slogan, after months of polling and focus group analysis, was "Together, America can do better," which is practically the same thing. And at the time, heaps of scorn. Oh, God, Democrats, you're the worst. What's wrong with this party? This is a total disaster. And, of course...
Did you just remember that it was not well received?
I remember. I remember quite well. I remember because Democrats won that year. That was the last midterm election that they won going away. They took back both houses of Congress. And so it's not because the slogan was awesome. It's that nobody cares about slogans. That's not why the midterms turned it one way or the other. I mean,
I think they don't turn on it, but change you can believe in. I mean, there's some good slogans that
to the extent that Together America Can Do Better mattered at all, it's that it was so boring that it allowed individual candidates to run as they chose. They weren't. I mean, it may not have been good, but it wasn't bad. It didn't hang on them like an albatross. You didn't have to answer for it in debates.
And maybe there's a benefit to being boring sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. So that was the first wave of complaining, was the slogan. But when the policies came out, there is a community of populist wonks. People like Matt Stoller, who's bounced around for different places. Now he's at New America, the think tank, and he's very focused on anti-monopoly policies.
Was this the guy who was like a blogger and then he was like a chief of staff or something?
He wasn't I don't think he was chief of staff, but he got a Senate staff gig via Sanders on the Senate Budget Committee, and he was with Alan Grayson before that. He's kind of bounced between. I mean, he came out of the blogosphere, but he's bounced between think tank jobs and congressional staff jobs, and done some writing for places like The Atlantic and BuzzFeed. So there's a group of folks like him who were ecstatic that the policies matched the kinds of things that they were asking for. And the rhetoric Schumer used to announce them was not just anti-corporate, but dumping on other Democrats in the recent past for not being stronger in their anti-corporate policies. I mean, he didn't name Obama or Clinton, but it was basically like, Democrats haven't been unflinchingly opposed to the accumulation of corporate power. We didn't break up enough mergers. Now, I mean, the truth is, Obama broke up a lot of mergers. They had a very active antitrust operation. And there are some sort of pro-Obama people like, how dare Schumer.
Corporations are people, my friend. And Bill Scher loves corporations.
That's true.
If you can cooperate.
Bill Scher thinks corporations can't be wished away. But I'm not opposed to antitrust. I'm not opposed to breaking up obscene mergers. But Obama did some of that, but Schumer is basically saying, I'm not going to relitigate the Obama years. I'm not going to go spend the next 4 years saying, hey, things are great under Obama. He's willing to just dump on it all and say it's a clean slate, and here's what we're going to do that's different. So there's some folks on the pro-Obama side that are kind of grousing about it, but on the Bernie side, they love it. And I don't know if the average rank and file foot soldier is paying attention to this, but in more wonkish circles they are. So they're very excited. I mean, and this comes out of a critique that Hillary lost because of economic reasons, more so than multicultural reasons. And if we had a stronger economic populist agenda, we could win those voters back.
All right. So you're saying, just to put a point on this, a finer point on this, you're saying that the media and most people didn't like this rollout, but the populist left, the Bernie Sanders left, did like it.
I got to be very precise about this. There is a populist wonk community that liked it very much. Not necessarily the slogan part, but the substance part.
And were there any? But was this a fight? Like, were there arguments on Twitter or the blogosphere about this? Like, where people like Stoller would push back at, like,
yes,
I don't know, Matthew Iglesias or something?
I mean, I can't spell out every single individual argument that's had, but there is discussion and commentary about this happening on left Twitter. Now, it's not true that everybody on the Bernie left likes this. It doesn't include single payer, for example. Now, here's where it gets a little interesting. Chuck Schumer on, I think, ABC on Sunday was asked about that, and he says, single payer is on the table. Medicare buying at 55 is on the table. Public option is on the table. So there's some people who are like, wow, Chuck Schumer, Wall Street's favorite Democrat, is is opening the door to single payer, and they're happy about that. And there are other folks saying, wait a second, single payer is not in these proposals. And we're going to, and I think there was an Our Revolution protest done outside the DNC. I read the story quickly, so forgive me if I get my facts wrong, but I believe there was a little kerfuffle outside the DNC headquarters the other day about this. So it's not total kumbaya, but the premise, they certainly embrace the critique that a more pointed economic message is the path to winning those voters back, and those are the voters that we need to win back. There's been another critique that, maybe those voters aren't reachable anymore because of things like Black Lives Matter and immigration and transgender issues, which we're going to get to soon. We can't get those voters, so stop obsessing about them. Hey, there are Romney-Clinton voters and other center-right voters that we didn't quite get who are not happy with Trump, and look, we got to drive that narrative.
This goes back to the special elections where, you might have been able to settle on which Democratic Party was it going to be. If Democrats had won in Montana, then it would be a Bernie Sanders sort of party. If Democrats had won in Georgia, then now we're going to be a sort of an Obama technocratic party. And we still don't know, right?
And I think there's a lot of folks that think it's not an either or. And in fact, so there's a group called Third Way, which has long been like the centrist group that the Bernie left despises. Third Way put out a report a week or so ago saying we've done the analysis of who voted and where they shifted from 2012. And sorry, kids, there are not enough Romney-Clinton voters. There's not enough center-right, upscale, moderate voters to win back the presidency with or win back Congress with. There are more Obama-Trump voters than Romney-Clinton voters, not to mention new Trump voters that folks need to worry about. So they're saying go for the sort of working class white guy in Pennsylvania. They were saying
don't go for.
They were saying you can't pick and choose. That all these slivers are slivers. And you can't have there's no narrow path to success, and the Obama-Trump chunk is bigger than the Romney-Clinton chunk, which sort of cuts against what you might think Third Way would be pushing, because they're not seen as folks they've been very actively anti-populist for a long time. They're actively saying don't follow Bernie, don't follow Elizabeth Warren. And they even said about Schumer's thing, there was stuff in there for us to like too. It wasn't all pro Bernie stuff. We can accept some of these other ideas that they have. So they're trying to be coalition builders right now. So
they were on top of it, like when Bill Clinton got elected in 1992. I mean,
it wasn't Third Way back then. It was the DLC.
Right, but I mean, it's similar
mindset. Now, having said all this, that was Monday. On Wednesday, Donald Trump comes out of nowhere with, if you're transgender, you can't be in the military. So here is a classic culture war issue that is not an economic matter to win back Trump voters with. And Chuck Schumer immediately goes on Twitter and says, we stand by, our patriots, and everybody, should be fit to serve. There was a quote that Axios got from an anonymous White House official saying, this is designed to trap Rust Belt Senate Democrats. So they have to own this issue to those working class voters. But Sherrod Brown in Ohio, Claire McCaskill in Missouri, Tammy Baldwin in Wisconsin, they all came out with statements opposing Trump on the subject. McCaskill retweeted John McCain's statement opposing Trump.
I would question the premise as to whether or not it's about the working class white sort of voter, Joe Sixpack. I would question the assumption that he cares about the transgender military issue, which I think is different than the bathroom issue.
Well, this is, so you had several Republicans, and not necessarily moderate Republicans, Orrin Hatch, Richard Shelby in Alabama, opposing Trump on this. And so Democrats, I think, are very excited, saying, look, the polls show that people don't want to discriminate against transgendered Americans. They don't even support these bathroom bills. Bathroom bill just had a massive backlash in North Carolina. The Republican was ousted even while Trump won. So this is bad politics for Trump. This is just crap. This is a ham-fisted attempt at wedge politics. But, and I got a piece about this that's in the queue of Politico. It's not published yet. Hope maybe later today. The argument that some said, and there's one Ohio County Democratic chairman that said, people in the heartland felt that Democrats cared more about where you went to the bathroom than about their jobs and their wages.
I think that's an interesting point.
So even if I've seen the white working class shift to Trump is not primarily through more religious voters.
Right.
So if you're a less religious white working class voter, maybe you don't care about the issue in a vacuum. But if you see Democrats talking about that issue more than the economic issues, you think, hey, they care about them and not me.
Yeah, it's the identity politics versus the economic politics.
So you can understand Schumer saying, I would prefer to talk about economic issues because that's what they care about most.
You may not be interested in the culture wars, Bill, but the culture wars are interested in you.
Well, that's exactly right. And it's not 1992. Democrats can't sister soldier their way out of this. You're not going to see Chuck Schumer or Bernie Sanders or whoever go to the Human Rights Campaign and go attack some transgender rights figure to show their white working class bona fides. That's not going to happen. The country is too diverse. The Democratic Party is too diverse. There are higher expectations amongst the Democratic base about what their leaders should be doing. And so when this issue gets shoved into the spotlight by Donald Trump, and he's clearly willing to do it, you will be forced to talk about it. So you can't have a strategy that relies upon separating the issues and downplaying one over the other.
I agree. You can't sister soldier this issue. I don't think. I still think you could maybe do it with Black Lives Matter. I think that's possible. That you could have. That would be very.
Every time an African American is shot by a police officer, you're going to have to talk about it. You're not going to be able to sort of vote yet. It's not going to happen. And there are people, and I've written about this in the past. There are people who voted for Obama, thinking it was going to make everything post-racial. And then when Obama started talking about these issues more, that got their back up, and Trump exploited that. And so you might say, when come back to transgender, well, the polls show that he's in the minority on this, and it didn't work in North Carolina. But he has a bond now with social conservatives that is rock hard, and they came out on election day. Look, Trump barely won. If those folks didn't show up, he couldn't have eked it out.
Right.
And sure, his approval ratings, 39% most of the time. But that 39% is heavily evangelical.
Which is why I found it coincidental that he decided to roll this out at the same time that conservatives were upset with him over the Jeff Sessions attacks.
Right. So, whatever you can say about how ridiculous Trump's politicking is, and I think it's very ridiculous, and I think it may well be his downfall. It may be that playing to the 39% is not a strategy to win re-election. I'm not saying that it is. But in the short run, the bottom doesn't fall out. Republicans, by and large, stay in line. Not completely. They're not passing his health care bill, for example. But there's not open revolt because that base stays in place and is immovable. So he has incentive to keep talking about it, regardless of what the long-term consequences are. And that means Democrats are going to have to talk about it, too.
He really needs a third-party candidate to run, right? I mean, very clearly, Donald Trump is not going to grow he has no interest in growing his base.
You're going to give them ideas. They're going to run a dummy candidate now because you thought of this.
They should. They need Ross Perot. They need like a Ross. Well, not a Ross Perot would actually hurt them, but they need like
they need Mike Bloomberg.
Yes. They need something like that so that he can win with 40, Bill Clinton, 43, 44%. That's what he needs.
Well, Bloomberg did not run in 2016 because Bernie did not get the nomination. And he made pretty clear if Bernie got it, he'd say, look, I can't leave this to be a choice between the far left and the anti-immigrant right. We need to have someone who's going to run up the middle. So we don't know what's going to happen in that Democratic primary yet. But it would not be surprising if Democrats pick someone who was considered, if not Bernie himself, someone in that mold, someone in the pro-business centrist middle is going to say, we can't leave America to this choice. And how that actually scrambles the map would be a complete unknown.
Indeed.
And we're getting far ahead of ourselves. But so talking about Trump's ties to the evangelical right and how that makes things a little complicated for Democrats, you wrote a piece about how the conservative movement's been New Yorkerized.
Yes.
By Trump, now by Scaramucci. You already had like the Wall Street contingent with like Gary Cohn and Steve Mnuchin.
My theory is that Fox News was the bridge to this. That, just the same way that the Cosby Show and shows like Will and Grace, helped basically change American attitudes toward African Americans and gays, that Fox News coming into your living room, if you're a conservative in Georgia or Alabama or Nebraska, that Fox News coming into your living room every day for 20 years with people like Bill O'Reilly and Sean Hannity and Jeanine Pirro and Eric Bolling, and Rudy Giuliani and others, that Fox News basically took away some of the stigma or stereotypes that conservatives had about New York, and that Trump benefited from that. And I think clearly he started off sort of the hybrid approach where he had, the Sean Spicers and Reince Priebus's of the world, and it does seem now like he is moving away from that, muddying down his New Yorkness with some Washington D.C.ness, and that he's going all in on New York. That's what it feels like. And I think Scaramucci is a caricature of a New Yorker, a parody of a New Yorker. And I'm sure Lorne Michaels is just chomping at the bit with this guy. But oh, by the way, Bill, why don't you tell the story? It's not a story, but you and I have both been in the same room with him.
Right. So last time we hung out in New York when I was in New York a few months ago, and you were going on Anderson Cooper's show, and we had our dinner with David. I was pronouncing his last name wrong.
Petrugia. David Petrugia, historian.
It was a fantastic guy. Read all of his books; they're fantastic. So you led us into the set, in the green room in the set at CNN, and one of the people on the panel was Scaramucci.
The Mooch.
And forgive me if I'm calling you out here, but what I remember of that day, because he was being a super Trump flack, and you were kind of like, offended that someone was being such a partisan and not giving the straight scoop. And we were talking afterwards, like you and Dave were like, "Who is that guy?" I'm like, "You don't know Anthony Scaramucci? you know this guy's story?" Because I remember, I think the video's going around a lot now, but I remember that he was one of the Wall Streeters that was for Obama in 2008, and then at a televised town hall, turns on Obama and says, "Yeah, you treated Wall Street like a piñata," and Obama had to say, asking people to pay their fair share of taxes is hardly treating you like a piñata. But after that exchange, Scaramucci abandons Obama, like a lot of other Wall Streeters, and backs Romney. But he still does a bunch of tweets that are still kind of socially liberal. He's pro-gun control. He said, we got to do something with climate change. But then in 2016, he goes with Scott Walker and he goes with Jeb Bush, and he bags on Trump, and now he's become like the biggest Trump lackey. But even after that whole narrative, who is being transformed here? Has the rural, white working class, social conservative right been New Yorkerized? Or has Trump and Scaramucci been converted into social conservatives and hard right wingers? Because I don't see the conservative movement becoming more secular. They're not moving leftward on gun control and climate. Certainly not on transgender issues. I mean, these are all things where either Trump or Scaramucci once articulated moderate views, and they're the ones who seem to have been pushed the other way. So
that's a valid point. But the point I was trying to make mainly is that that New York, we always thought like nobody from New York could win because whether it's Nelson Rockefeller being or Rudy Giuliani being sort of too moderate or and there's the New York thing is off-putting. I mean, New Yorkers look at Scaramucci. I mean, they're brash. This is stereotyping, of course. I know you're from New York, right?
Well, I actually remember very vividly when I went to Oberlin College. So I'm from the New York area. Gene Pure used to be my DA in Westchester County, and when I went to Oberlin, I knew all 10 of the conservatives on campus. And one of them was from the South.
Michelle Malkin.
Well, I knew Michelle, and I knew some other less famous ones. And I was talking with this one guy who's from the South, and this was 1992 or 1991, and I was really excited about Mario Cuomo getting in. I actually interned with Cuomo in the summer of 1991, and I thought the world of him. I thought he was clearly the best choice. He clearly the most dynamic, charismatic possibility. He would walk away with it. And this was the first guy to tell me, he's from New York, buddy. People in the South are going to vote for a guy from New York. Are you insane? That's right, not going to work. Right. And so to the extent that, and Cuomo was not just any. I mean, he was New York. He had a clear New York edge to him. He's like Al Smith.
Well, there's the Italian. There's the Italian and rumors that he might be connected to some unseemly.
Right, which got him into a row with Bill Clinton, in 1992. But that's a whole other story. Right. So, to the extent that the New York conservatives have been pushed to the right by the Republican base, right. The Republican base has been culturally converted to embrace New York brashness. So they're not offended by that kind of in your face.
They love it because now
the genteel South is gone.
Yeah, because now being a fight, and it's not just the South. I think the Midwest too. What it was, when I lived in
Midwest nice.
Yeah,
nice.
Minnesota nice, North Dakota nice, and when I was out in North Dakota. I never heard of the term Easterner before, but they use the word. It's like the N word almost when they call you an Easterner. It's meant to be an insult, and of course they do it in a very passive aggressive Norwegian,
Would they still do it? Would they still just say, well, Trump's just one of the good ones. Scaramucci's one of the good ones. But the rest of them are still horrible.
I think Fox News has normalized New Yorkness for America. There used to be these regional differences where, remember the Pace Picante sauce commercial, New York City? And then there was the King of the Hill episode where Hank, it turns out he was born in New York City, and he's like, it's like the worst thing that could possibly ever happen to him. I think that's gone. So
if you're a rural conservative and you're going on vacation, is it a fun trip to go to New York? I want to see Trump Tower. I want to see Fox News. I want to see where Bill O'Reilly lives. Let's drive out to Long Island and find Bill O'Reilly's house.
Let's go to Levittown and learn about all the stuff he did on a yacht. Did you hear that part, Bill, when Donald Trump's speech to the Boy Scout Jamboree, where he talked about Levitt?
Right.
And,
right.
Yeah. Anyway, I think that it's now a tourist destination. And by the way, I didn't know this until I started making New York my second home. I'm there I was there this morning. As recently as 2 hours ago, I was in it's amazing how quick the shuttle is. I didn't realize how many Trump towers there are. There's like 5 big Trump buildings in Midtown. It's like, it's not just the Trump. It's not just that, the Fifth Avenue Trump. There's a lot of Trump buildings.
He's very good at slapping his name on things. That is his one skill set, except for healthcare legislation.
I think I should start the Peterman reality tour, where you get a pizza bagel, and I will drive you to all 4 or 5 of the Trump buildings in New York for a price.
Okay, I'm sorry, Matt. No one eats pizza bagels in New York City. You've already failed in your attempt to be an honorary New Yorker.
Raisin bagels. That's what really makes it disgusting. Let me ask you this, Bill. Did you see the part where the video, the meme or whatever, where Scaramucci, and by the way, this total Dickensian name, right? I was once fired by a guy named Killingsworth, but I do think that Scaramucci is an interesting name. But did you see the video where they juxtapose him using the exact same body language?
It's a Daily Show montage.
And here's the question: is it, number one, is it a coincidence? I find that hard to believe. Is it, number two, that he just admires Trump and has copied his body language because he thinks it's effective? Or number three, is it mirroring? Is it him? He has done this to learn to manipulate Trump. There's some sort of psychological theory that if you mirror people's body language, subconsciously they will like you.
I have a less exciting answer, which is that they're New Yorkers. New Yorkers.
So you think it's totally organic?
New Yorkers. That's how New Yorkers gesticulate. That's what being a New Yorker is.
All of them? I mean, is that normal? So you're saying that's not unique to Trump? That that rings fruit? These
are the people that I grew up with. That's just what being a New Yorker is, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, so you don't buy into the theory that Trump has basically practiced things that the gestures and the language.
I do think with language, I do think his behavior trickles down to his staff, to other Congress people, to his doctor, to his lawyers. I think there is mirroring that goes on, but I think hands is not. That's a subconscious thing, and I'm sure it's like that he practiced that his whole life.
I use hands all the time. When you're a celebrity, they let you do that. I use hands all the time. I make gestures, and I have no idea where they come from. I do know that it's dangerous to make gestures because I tend to knock drinks over at tables. But I don't know where mine come from, and I'd like to know, maybe if someone out there could say that those are from Maryland, that I make Maryland. There is a Maryland accent. Maybe there's Maryland hand gestures. I don't know.
I don't know either.
I didn't know there were New York gestures.
Oh yes. Oh well. Some I'm sure you do know. Well, probably should leave it on that note, sir. Andy, you got a plug before we go?
Well, people should go to listen to our. We had a discussion, Matt Lewis and the News, on iTunes about John McCain's legacy. That's pretty good thing to go check out.
I had a new podcast. My normal co-host has been on vacation, but I did an interview with our good friend Carl Cannon.
Oh yes.
We've talked about his book before on this date, so we had a nice conversation about his book. And
what's the name of that podcast? How do I find that?
That's This Is Not Normal at liberaloasis.com, also available at iTunes and Stitcher. And we talk about putting Trump in historical context. Is he unique, or have we been here before? So it was a really great conversation, and you learn more about how Carl is able to come up with his morning notes every single day and a little historical vignette.
Speaking of a guy who's a character and who has a voice, I don't know how somebody, not me, I'm not good, but good at it. But somebody could do a Carl Cannon impersonation with the voice, especially. He's he's got panache.
Yes, absolutely. So check out the book, check out the podcast, and you talked to him also on your podcast too, right?
I did, and he also was on the Weekly Standard podcast, which is amazing because they don't even have guests who don't work at the week. So he's really making the podcast rounds, and it's good because I've noticed on every one, it's not the same spiel. He's got 360 some different topics that's in the book. Different, each day has a history lesson. So I guess he's not He's not bound to like the same talking points.
All right, and so hopefully my political piece on Dems and the better deal and the transgender issue will be up soon. And until then, we'll talk next week.
Yeah, follow us on Twitter at DMZ Show, and we'll see you back here in the DMZ.
Take care.
Thanks.